Welcome to the Odds Breakers, number one place for shared, sharp betting information.
Welcome back to podcast 29 of 2024. I'm your host, Kiev O'Neill. You can follow me on Twitter at OBKiev. Follow us at the Odds Breakers. Follow us on social media /the Odds Breakers. This episode is being brought to you by BetMGM. Bet $5, get $150 in free bets. Terms, conditions, and location apply. If you'd like to support the Oddsbreakers and benefit from our premium plays, please visit theoddsbreakers.com. Click shop and become a member. Pick any of our winning cappers to get their premium plays before the line moves. You can also support us on patreon.com. And if nothing else, please visit the Oddsbreakers and become a free picks and Telegram subscriber. You can also get our new Premier Insider package for only $50 a month, where you get all of our premium plays from all cappers, as well as premium articles and betting systems. We have a great show for you today because it's Masters Week, and we are bringing in two heavy hitters in Brady Kannon from PGA Golf, as well as Sports Grid, and Patrick Gates, our very own Patrick Gates, who writes the best golf perspectives articles at theoddsbreakers.com. If you haven't read one of them yet, you will absolutely be blown away as a golf fan and a golf sports bettor. He goes into every single detail. There are graphs, just an amazing betting preview for the Masters. Check it out at theoddsbreakers.com. We're going to talk to those two about some Masters plays for the weekend. And we're going to also get into some UFC 300. I'm going to go solo and do some UFC 300 and talk about some of the plays that I am making for the big UFC event coming up this Saturday. But before we get into all that, quick recap on college basketball. We did hit that 10-1 on UConn. I only put a small hedge back on the Purdue side since it was so easy at the plus money, but was able to rake in most of that 10-1 and was very happy about that, being that I thought UConn was the best team since January when we made that bet. January 29th, I believe, is when I put that bet in, and that came to fruition rather easily. How do you beat every single team that you play by 13 or more points over the past 2 years? Cover every single college basketball NCAA tournament game for the past 12 years. Just an absolutely insane run. And Purdue, their guards could do nothing. And I think the book was kind of out on how to beat Purdue, or at least how to try to beat Purdue. When Wisconsin beat them in the Big Ten championship, they really stopped a lot of three-point shooters. And I'm wondering if Dan Hurley did that kind of homework and figured it out, because the only guy they couldn't stop was Zach Edey. They let him have his 2-point shots, but too bad Purdue didn't give him all the shots, because Purdue was missing from three. They were missing from the lane. They were missing from deep. Anything that didn't go in Zach Edey's hands was pretty much missed by this team. And only attempting 7 threes? I mean, at that point, I'm trying to shoot NBA threes. You know, if you're getting guarded that hard at the line, you got to get your guys open and figure this out. But UConn just did a fantastic job in shutting it down. And Dan Hurley, even though he's kind of a spaz, and he was spazzing out when he was up by double digits with 5 minutes left in the game, is right now the best college basketball coach in all the land. And I found that to be true last year even, but he just kind of reproved it this year. But a big guy and a big name that's not the best college basketball coach, and probably not even an average college basketball coach, is Coach Cal, because no one's ever had more talent than Calipari and has done so little with the team, especially on how Kentucky's been exiting so early in the NCAA tournament. That big first round 3-14 upset was really the story of the whole first weekend of the NCAA tournament. But hey, I understand why he moved to Arkansas. A, because Arkansas wants some big names and some big quality recruits, and kind of hoping he turns it around a little bit. And B, Calipari couldn't stay there. I mean, Kentucky was done with him. They were sick of him. They're even if he stayed there and got paid, it would have been a big distraction to this team. He still would have brought in big recruits, but the fans wouldn't like him, and he was starting to feel the pressure. And the way I look at it from Arkansas is, you lost Musselman. I mean, who else was out there? Why not bring in a guy to bring the recruits and just hope he stumbles onto a win? Because if you're or a tournament Final Four is what I'm trying to say, not a win, but a couple tournament wins, maybe 3 or 4 of them would be nice. But I think there's a better chance to do that with better talent and bad coaching than there is to have with bad talent and good coaching, So that's kind of the balance that they look at. And they're going to get the headlines with Calipari early. And if they hire just, for example, Lamont Paris from South Carolina, or a Frank Martin that was at South Carolina, now at UMass, it wouldn't have got the headlines, and he still would be under some pressure because Musselman did take this team to quite a few Elite Eights. So I understand the hire from Arkansas. I'm not sure if I like it just because of how bad he's coached, but hey, he's always going to be in the contention now because of his recruiting, and that's something Arkansas can stand by. So I do understand it. Don't like him as a coach, but I understand the hire. And sometimes that's what you need. Hopefully that school's got some NIL money because things are definitely changing and focusing towards that standard. The one and done is probably most likely done, being that some mid-tier players that aren't going to necessarily be NBA lottery picks are going to stay and get paid $1 million, $2 million, get a little bit more education before they jump into the NBA, because they still could prove themselves and become a lottery ticket. This is kind of where NIL money, I believe, saves college sports in a way that it wasn't doing earlier. Shifting into the NFL, because the NFL is ruling things. I just made another play for the NFL draft, kind of like an overhyped position. Now, it is a premium play, so I'm not going to disclose it right now. I might next week for the podcast, but there's lots of changes and lots of noise out there when it comes to the NBA draft and some of these odds, and it's something that you want to pick up on early so you can possibly get some value and maybe bet the other side and get some value and kind of hope that you can maybe put yourself in a position where you can get plus money on both sides. There's one in particular I saw today, and I will possibly discuss that next week. But more importantly, the NFL keeps moving here, and it looks like the Texans just signed Azeez Al-Shaair as their newest player to the upcoming season, another linebacker. I mean, this Texans team has really reloaded, and you have to give them credit for what they're doing because they know they have a quarterback on a rookie contract, and now it's time to go for it and start paying players. Does that always work out? No, it does not always work out. And I am actually starting to think that I'm starting to go towards the fade part of the Texans. Now, the Texans win total is 9.5, juice to the over at minus 140. So it's pretty close to a 10 right now. But this thing gets up to 10.5. I'm going to probably have to start at least looking towards the under because this team does have a first place schedule. It's not going to be super easy playing the Chiefs, the Ravens, and the Buffalo Bills this year. So it's a situation where sometimes things just get a little bit overhyped, and sophomore slumps are a real thing. Sophomore slumps are a real thing. To be honest with you, I can sit all year on this one because there's going to be hype on the Texans pretty much the rest of the whole summer. So it just could probably keep growing and growing until we figure out if this number is going to be right or not. And right now, I think 9.5 is fair even. It's 9.5 juice to the over. I'm not so sure I'm ready to completely jump and commit to something like that where the AFC has to play the extra away game in NFC territory. So remember that. Looks like Josh Allen just signed a pretty big deal. Not quarterback Josh Allen, but defensive end pass rusher Josh Allen. $150 million, $88 million guaranteed from the Jaguars, and he had a Jaguars franchise record at 17.5 sacks last season. So big news for them keeping their guy. It's nice to see some teams keep their guys when they do well. Jaguars did not do well as a team. Definitely did not exceed their expectations. They went below their expectations, but It's just going to be interesting to see how they kind of shape up in that AFC South division. Now they're the team that's people are more ignoring. Maybe you might find something value on the Jaguars. Right now, their season win total 8.5 juice to the over. I bet you that actually dies down a little bit and starts going a little bit more towards the under. The question is how good the Colts are going to be, and obviously how good the Titans are going to be after all of their changes. So I'm expecting kind of bottom of the barrel stuff from them, at least from the beginning. All right, that's enough talk for the NFL. We're going to do more next week, and next week will be where I go over my top quarterback draft ratings. I wanted to spend a little bit more extra time creating it, and there was just way too much going on this week with the Masters. So without further ado, let's get into some UFC 300. And wow, is this an amazing event. We have a great title fight between Alex Pereira versus Jamahal Hill. Jamahal Hill had to come in a little bit late for this one. I think he still had about 6 to 8 weeks, but still, not completely ready to get in this fight. I know he was a little bit hurt from his last bout, but there's the headliner right there. And I'm going to get to the headliner last and start with some of the prelims to handicap this card. So I'm going to talk about the early prelims quick. I haven't made any plays yet, but Deiveson Figueiredo is fighting Cody Garbrandt as the first fight of this whole event. And this is kind of worthy of a just normal fight night card as being a main event, because Deiveson was just the champion. And Cody Garbrandt has been winning his fights finally and fighting better. But, you got Deiveson as a minus 300 favorite. That is a 75% chance of implied odds that he's going to win. I don't disagree with that. I think it's correct. I mean, I can't completely trust Deiveson now. He's made some stupid mistakes. He's now kind of out of contention. You wonder where his mind is, yet he's still the tier 1 fighter that we remember in the flyweight class, but he is moving up to bantamweight here. So, once you start fighting some bigger guys, things start changing. At the same time, I always thought he had some rough weight cuts, and maybe this was the better suited class for him. He's going to be against guys like Corey Sandhagen, Peter Yan, Marlon Vera, Henry Cejudo, obviously the champion Sean O'Malley. I personally think that Deiveson is probably a little too small for the bantamweight, and he's probably getting a little bit too old at 36 years old to be a true title contender. So I have issues with him. I'm not throwing him in my parlays. I think that this could be a live spot for Cody Garbrandt. But, if Garbrandt's going to win this, it's going to be by KO. Garbrandt does not have the greatest ground game in the world. He's fought a lot of guys who are stand-up fighters, and he's beaten a lot of guys also that are stand-up fighters, but he's lost to Dillashaw a couple times. Pedro Munoz he lost to by getting knocked out. So hasn't fought a ton of wrestlers. I don't think he's beaten a lot of wrestlers since at least 2016. But Cody Garbrandt at 32 years old is kind of finally starting to go a little bit on the over the hill side himself. But gun to the head, and if I had to bet this, I'm betting Garbrandt at the plus 230, plus 240 range. Most likely loses, but man, step up in weight class for Deiveson. Deiveson can get a little bit boxed in this situation. Garbrandt, his defense has been decent in this situation here against the grappler. If you want to look at the actual numbers here, his takedown defense is 80%. This is close to being a play on Garbrandt, but I just don't trust him from all the losses that I've seen him take before. But he is the bigger man here and possibly should be able to take care of Deiveson in this bout. 5'8", he stands. Deiveson, 5'5". Next one is interesting. Bobby Green versus Jim Miller. Two big veterans in the industry. Jim Miller, 40 years old. Bobby Green, 37. Bobby Green's the minus 180 favorite here. And, for Bobby, I think that he's still the much better puncher. 6.14 significant strikes landed per minute to 2.93 for Jim. I think that might just overwhelm Jim a little bit. If Jim's going to have any shot in this, he's going to try to get it to the ground. But at the same time, I don't think it's going to be enough. I don't completely trust Bobby Green because Jim Miller, to be honest with you, has been on a little tear himself lately. His last 6 fights, he's won 5 of them. Against Gabriel Benitez, he submitted him. Jesse Butler, not that big of a deal. He did lose to Alexander Hernandez, who just lost last week to Damon Jackson, so not that great of a loss. But he beat Cowboy Cerrone, Nicholas Mata, just some tier 3, tier 4 guys. But Bobby Green should be able to take care of business here and knock him out. He was just recently knocked out to a guy on this card also named Jalen Turner, who I may be having a premium play on, so I'm going to avoid his fight here in the early prelims. Let's move on to the normal prelims. And I'm going to talk a little bit about Aljamain Sterling against Calvin Kattar. Now, I think in this card, I'm going to be looking at some of these short parlays, maybe kind of like round robin a few of these, because I just think that the favorites at minus 170, minus 180 are true favorites. Aljamain Sterling was just the champion of the bantamweight class, right? And now he's fighting Calvin Kattar, who really hasn't done a whole hell of a lot in the lightweight class. But Aljamain, just like the last fighter here, like Davison, moving up in weight class, yet is the favorite here, but a less of a favorite. You're at minus 180 here. Well, I wasn't super high on Aljamain, to be completely honest with you. I thought he was a little bit more of a fake champion, being that he got that disqualification against Peter Yan, and he just luckily won the first couple rounds in a split decision against Peter Yan, where Peter Yan still looked like he was the better fighter. And then he fights TJ Dillashaw, and he knocked out Dillashaw. I give him credit for that one. And then lost a split decision to Cejudo, where Cejudo thought, or he won a split decision against Cejudo, where Cejudo thought he won, and many other people thought that Cejudo won that as well. And then, of course, he lost and get knocked out by Sean O'Malley. But Calvin Kattar, his only chance here is to knock out Aljamain Sterling, because he's not the greatest wrestler. He also has lost some split decisions himself against Josh Emmett, who's just, the biggest motor in probably the whole UFC. This guy's just got all kinds of heart and will stick with his opponents. So, not a bad loss, really, in my opinion, for Kattar against Josh Emmett. The Arnold Allen loss, knee injury is pretty much what happened to him. And in my opinion, he's probably the better fighter than Allen, but he did lose a decision against Max Holloway. He couldn't take Max Holloway out, who's obviously fighting later in this card, but I do give him credit for beating Dan Ige, who is a wonderful fighter himself, and Giga Chikadze. I mean, with Aljamain Sterling is a grappler a bit himself. He knows how to do it from the top and the bottom, but he has such an interesting style, interesting movement in his body. And Sterling is definitely the smaller man, but he only absorbs 2.41 significant strikes per minute to Kattar at 7.1. Kattar can kind of turn into a punching bag sometimes, and you worry about that. Now, they're both significant strikes landed per minute is pretty close, but I would argue that Aljamain Sterling spends more time grappling and taking his opponents down. That's why his takedown average is at 1.97. This kind of opened up as close to a pick 'em, and money came in on Aljamain Sterling. Even though Sterling's moving up in weight, fighting a bigger man, Sterling should have the fight prowess and skills to beat a guy like Calvin Kattar that really hasn't fought a ton of grapplers. Josh Emmett, Arnold Allen, Giga Chikadze, Dan Ige, all basically stand-up fighters. Jeremy Stevens, so. In this situation, I think that he's going to face a little bit of a guy that he hasn't really trained that well for. What's funny about the featherweight class is I've always called it a little bit weak, even when Volkanovski was the champion there, just because there wasn't a ton of grapplers here. I think there's going to be a little bit more of an advantage here for Sterling, and I do agree with the minus 180, and I would definitely want to find a dance partner for that one and to pair them up. So the prelim of the whole fight card is possibly the best event in the fight card. You have the light heavyweight bout between Yuri Prochazka versus Alexander Rakic. And wow, both are close in age, 31 years old and 32 for Rakic. You got to remember, Yuri was just the champion until he hurt his shoulder. And then he comes back and fights Alex Pereira, makes an absolute stupid decision to go down too early on Pereira. And Pereira just elbowed and punched him in the head a bunch of times and basically beat him while he's just trying to take him down. The ref called it, and some people say he called it early, but Yuri came up and said no, he was fading at that moment. So I just thought it was a terrible mistake, but that's Yuri's only loss. Now, he should have probably lost to Glover Teixeira, being that Glover had him beat points-wise until the very end when Glover kind of gave up after 5 rounds. But Glover's tough because he's such a great wrestler. Alexander Rakic, he knows how to wrestle, but he's more of a stand-up fighter, and I'm going to go with the bigger guy here. Everyone's worried about Yuri's shoulder and how he kind of came off that looking bad, but he's a lot bigger than Alexander Rakic, and in my opinion, that's where he's going to get a lot of his advantage. Yuri lands 5.31 significant strikes to Rakic at 4.01. Now, I will say Yuri does absorb more. His defense isn't the greatest there, but he's also really good with the leg kicks, which I think could get to Rakic, especially when he's kind of coming off after some of those knee surgeries. Now, Rakic isn't the easiest man to take down. His takedown defense is at 90%, but I'm wondering if this fight gets later and later where Yuri actually is going to have a little bit more of a grappling advantage in this situation. Looking at the strength of schedule here, I'm not super impressed with Rakic's win over Thiago Santos. Thiago Santos has been on the I just want to get a paycheck for since 2018. Since he beat Jan Blachowicz, he has lost 7 of his last 8 fights. One was a push, it looks like, with Rob Wilkinson. No contest overturned, but this guy's getting beat in the PFL. It's been terrible with Thiago Santos. So I can't give him a ton of credit for beating Thiago. He beat Anthony Smith, in the decision. Anthony Smith's more of a tier 2-ish fighter in this situation, but losing to Volkan Oezdemir by split decision was a bad look. And obviously his knee injury to Jan Blachowicz was really what hurt him in that war. But I thought Jan Blachowicz was going to finish that fight anyway. He just had some bad luck and got that really bad knee injury. But it's been a couple years. May of 2022 was the last time that Rakic got into the cage. But Yuri obviously very recently has gotten in the cage. Even though he had his shoulder injured, he got in November of 23, and he last fought before that June 12th of 2022 when he got the title from Glover Teixeira. But he has some great wins. Dominic Reyes, he's beat Volkan Oezdemir by knocking him out. Fabio Maldonado is a pretty good fight. Then it gets a little bit worse after that. But you got to give Yuri a lot of credit because he's been finishing his opponents pretty much all the way going back to his really early days. As a matter of fact, he only has 1 win by decision, 25 by KO, 3 by submission. Now he does have 3 losses by KO, so I'm a little bit concerned about his defense, but I just think he's the bigger guy, and you're getting him around plus 100 against Rakic, who hasn't really beaten anybody himself. Yeah, I'm not so big on Rakic here. I think Yuri would have been a much bigger favorite if he didn't fight and lose to Alex Pereira, right? I think he'd be a minus 200 favorite in that situation. Well, not much has changed. He still beat Glover and he still beat all those big guys, and he still should have more hype on him than being at minus 105. I took this at plus 115 3-4 weeks ago. I still like it here at minus 105. So we'll give it out for free at the minus 105 for 2 stars.
Well, I've been with the best, and I beat the best. I've retired more men than Social Security.
All right, moving on to the main card here. Some great fights. Bo Nickel versus Cody Brunage. I mean, Bo's like a minus 1,600, a minus 2,000 favorite against Cody. Now, Bo keeps fighting better and better fighters, but he's just been finishing everybody so easily because he's a former Penn State world-class wrestler. Almost made the Olympics at the 89 kilograms, but David Taylor, his former Penn State buddy, who's been there since 2018, I guess, and this was back in 2022, I'm talking, was the one that beat him out, and he took the gold medal. So Nickel could have been the second best, for all we know, in the whole world at that time. But either way, I mean, that's what he does. He'll wrestle you to death, and it's going to be wrestling. The question is if he finishes him in the first or second round. I guess you can think that maybe Brundage is slightly live because he has knocked some people out, and he should know everything of what to expect. But, I mean, the only thing I would look at is a KO prop on Brundage for a tiny bit of money, maybe like a tenth or a unit or so at 20-1, just because most likely Bo Nichols finishing this thing in the first or second round. And the question is, do you want to possibly wait till this could go to the second round? Do you think that Brundage is able to make it to the second round? Well, I don't know. I mean, he's lost a couple of his fights in the first round before, so I'm not super confident that he's going to necessarily do it again, but that's just another possible way to look at it if you want to pick around for Bo Nickel to win. It'll be definitely laying a lot of juice in the first, but you might be able to get some plus money, plus 300 or so for the second round. Next big fight, you have Charles Oliveira versus Arman Tsarukyan. And Oliveira's burned a bunch of my money in the past, winning fights that I don't think he should have. But Arman Tsarukyan is the perfect man to fight Charles, because Arman Tsarukyan is also a world-class wrestler against a BJJ black belt in Charles. But, man, I'm going to go with the wrestler over the black belt. He's a little bit shorter, but he's thicker. He's stronger. He even takes down Charles. His only problem is that he gets a little bit too aggressive and leaves himself open to be punched a little bit. That's why you're probably looking at minus 225 instead of minus 250 or minus 300. But, you know, the funny thing is Arman doesn't submit a lot. You know, he wrestles the hell out of you and then tries for the ground and pound. But being that he's so good on the ground, he's really not susceptible to submissions, and I think that's where Charles is going to need to beat him, is either standing or trying to catch him compromised in a bad position. Probably not going to happen because Arman is just that good of a wrestler. But, I mean, Arman has submitted people before, but his last submission, man, God, back in 2017 in just a lower league, he was submitting a bunch of guys back then. Easy fighters, but now he usually beats people by TKO or decision here. I would possibly look at a Arman Tsarukyan by TKO. I think that's probably the most probable way that he wins this fight. Now, I'm going to have to pull up the odds here. I don't think you're going to get anything special for this KO situation. Arman Tsarukyan by TKO DQ plus 130. Not terrible. By decision, it's plus 300. But by submission, believe it or not, it's only plus 700. So I also find that kind of interesting, too. I just see him pounding some elbows into Charles here a little bit. So I think he wins this fight. And I think this is probably the safest parlay leg out of the whole situation for the price. Obviously, Bo Nickel is, right? But for the price, definitely would go with Arman. Next fight should be a banger, too. Justin Gaethje versus Max Holloway. Max Holloway, one of the best ever, in my opinion, featherweights. He just could not quite get by Volkanovski, but he throws a ton of punches. He's actually submitted a few guys in the past, but his path to fighting and beating Justin Gaethje would be by submission, because Gaethje's just way too good technical fighter on his feet, and I don't think that Max Holloway is going to have any chance unless he catches Justin Gaethje, kind of the way Charles did when they fought each other, when everyone was on Gaethje and Charles choked him out. So that's interesting. Now, Holloway has 2 submissions to his record and 11 KOs. But when was the last time that he submitted somebody Also, Max Holloway hasn't submitted anybody since 2015, and it was against Cub Swanson, and it was a guillotine choke. It wasn't even like a real rear naked choke. So, I don't know if he's going to be able to get by that, because Justin Gaethje, when he lost his fight, it was a rear naked choke to Charles Oliveira. But Justin Gaethje, that's the only way he loses is by those amazing wrestlers. And unfortunately, Max Holloway, too small, moving up in weight class in this situation. I don't see Max Holloway winning this. I think this is all Justin Gaethje. I think Justin Gaethje could finish him, but I've also seen Max Holloway absolutely bludgeoned and going the full distance. So you wonder how this fight would be possibly officiated if they keep letting a bloody Max Holloway go farther and farther into this fight. But hey, it's what, a 3-round fight? So it's not like he has to get that far in this situation. It is not a title fight. So I could see Justin Gaethje just winning by points here, but you're laying only -160, -170 on Gaethje. I think there's plenty of value there. I think if you put Gaethje in a few parlays, you can also have a little bit of a saver. Max Holloway by submission situation. Looks like the price is at about plus 2,000 in that. So that's the only caveat here. I mean, if you use Gaethje as a big parlay piece in some of these round robins, you can put a little bit of a sneaky small 0.1, 0.2 limit bet on that situation, just in case it happens, being that we have seen Gaethje susceptible to submissions in the past. Finally, moving up to the women's strawweight title belt between Zhang Weili versus Jan Yigzonin. And man, this is a massive money line here for Zhang. And it is -500, -550. It's almost like if you're going to use her as a parlay piece, you have to be pretty sure about it, because it's really not adding a hell of a lot of value here. She's -485 at DraftKings, but the truth is, I don't see her losing this fight. I think she's the best woman fighter right now, pound for pound, with, obviously Shevchenko kind of getting older and Nunez retiring, right? This fight is going to be a 5-round fight. Both fighters land at a little bit over 5.5 significant strikes per minute. Weili Zhang, she's the more accurate one, 60% to 50%. She's got the takedown advantage, 2.29 to 0.86 per 15 minutes. I mean, all the stats really point to Zhang Weili. The question is, what can beat Zhang Weili? Well, I mean, I've seen her lose to Rose Namajunas, and that's was a little bit fluky to me. I don't know how she let herself get in that situation. Actually, it was twice. One was a split decision, and the other was a head kick. Just kind of opened herself up and got knocked out. That was extremely surprising. But she came back hard and just won her last 3 fights, including against Amanda Lemos, who couldn't do anything. I don't think Zhang's going to put herself in that situation. I think she's smart enough to not do that. But at the same time, Yigzonin, she is very good at some straight up knockouts. She's got 8 knockouts, 1 submission, and 9 decisions. So she knows how to lay it on herself a little bit. And she beat Mackenzie Dern in a majority decision. She beat Jessica Andrade by knocking her out and catching her. But she also lost to Mariana Rodriguez in a split decision and Carla Esparza. So I think this is a good price for this fight. I don't think I'm going to bust up my parlays right now with Weili Zhang. Maybe I put her with Gaethje or something like that. But in my personal opinion, I don't think that she's live, and Jan is live in this fight. I think Zhang is the proper favorite. That brings us to the main event, where you have Alex Pereira versus Jamahal Hill. And man, both of these fighters are big. Finally, Pereira is fighting somebody his size, and Jamahal Hill coming back to fight a title because he lost his title himself for being injured, which is very strange, I gotta tell you, in this light heavyweight class. But here we are. Jamahal Hill is back, and he's fighting the best kickboxer around right now in Alex Pereira. You see, that's my whole problem for this bout right now anyway, is because the whole kickboxing situation, I think Hill is much better against, some wrestlers that try to get him down. He kind of proves himself to be better. His last fight was a win against Glover Teixeira, and that's where he got the title, but then he had to vacate that title and himself. And obviously this is when Yuri was still in healing, and then Hill fought Glover for it, and Hill gets it, but then Hill hurts himself. I believe he ruptured his Achilles back in July of 2023. So that was really rough. And then obviously the title, jumps a little bit back. And then it goes to Alex Pereira, who stepped in to fight John Blachowicz for the belt. And he wins that one and then defends it, of course, against Yuri. Now, the problem with Hill, and I think it's kind of a big problem, is that he's a southpaw. And he's going to be fighting a kickboxer, The way that Pereira got knocked out when he fought Izzy is a cross, right? A right cross. But that's not going to be necessarily as open in that situation because he's going to have his right hand up when he's fighting against Hill. And I think that's an issue, is stopping the left cross, which would give possibly the knockout way to win for Hill. Hill can't wrestle at all, so I'm not even worried about that. Alex Pereira, believe it or not, is getting better and better at wrestling, being in Glover Teixeira's corner. So I find that interesting. And you could see him stop the takedowns against John Blachowicz and against Yuri. So he's kind of learned a little bit about that if things go a little bit raw to the ground. But the truth is that even though, Jamahal Hill has all that jiu-jitsu, all that power and all that knockout situations, that he can do. It took him all the way through the fourth round to beat Thiago Santos. He can be a little bit raw in some times as well. Against Darko Stosic back in 2020, that went the distance, He hasn't had that many great wins. OSP at the end of OSP's career. Johnny Walker, who has that jaw that is like a China doll. Jimmy Crute, I believe Crute got beat up right away. That's fine. But the Glover Teixeira one was really a situation where it went the full distance, and a lot of people thought Glover should have won this. From a striking side, I'm going to give it to the kickboxer. How do you not? I think that the significant strikes are a little bit green for 5 to 7.31 for Alex Pereira, because Alex Pereira, when he came right in, he came facing the top competition immediately. He didn't waste too much times, but looking at some more of the stats, his accuracy is at 62%. Jamahal Hill's is at 54%. Both of them absorb about the same amount, 3.65 significant strikes to Jamahal Hill at 3.35 per minute. I'm not even really going to factor grappling into this situation. I guess the one thought that you might have is Jamahal Hill is a big man, and that's where Pereira is not used to fighting. But I would argue that, Izzy and John Blachowicz is also very big men themselves, and I like that Alex had the stronger strength of schedule right when he comes in the UFC. He has a cake fight, and then he goes right to Bruno Silva, has to fight Silva. Then Sean Strickland, he beats Strickland in one punch, knocks out Sean Strickland. Then he beats Izzy in that punch. Then he loses to Izzy again in that punch. Then he gets the belt in that split decision against John Blachowicz, because if you remember, that's when Alex actually went up from the middleweight to the light heavyweight class. So even though he fought a bunch of light heavyweight guys in the past, he's fought a lot of big guys that kickbox in the past too. So I think Alex Pereira is the play here. I'm going to play it for 2 stars. I laid the minus 130, minus 125-ish, and I gave that out at minus 130. And I have absolutely no problem playing that again. Right now, the current odds is minus 130 on DraftKings, so that's what we'll give it out for 2 stars.
And so then I got a call from him saying, we don't have to worry about money no more. And I said, that's good. One less thing.
All right, my friends, that is my thoughts on UFC 300. We're going to play Yuri, obviously, at the minus 105, and we're playing Alex Pereira at the minus 130, both for 2 stars. But remember, we're also liking Justin Gaethje a hell of a lot. We're going to have him in some parlays, and we also like Arman Sarukin and a little bit of Aljamain Sterling. Now, let's get into the Masters with our wonderful guest, Mr. Patrick Gates from the Oddsbreakers and Mr. Brady Kannon from PGA Golf. All right. Now I'm very pleased to welcome back 2 of golf's greatest cappers, and Mr. Patrick Gates from the Oddsbreakers and Brady Kannon from Sports Grid and the PGA Tour. You can follow them both on Twitter at Gator Betting at Las Vegas Golfer. Well, here we are, guys. Right smack dab in the middle of the week. The Masters was right around the corner. Tell me you're getting excited, Brady.
Oh, man. I tell you, every year, like you were talking about backstage, the NCAA tournament ends and you think you can exhale for a minute, but then the next thing you know, it's Masters week. And one of my favorite weeks of the entire year in all of sports. Just such a thrilling event, the tradition, the history, the golf course itself, the beauty of Augusta National. The field every year just seems to get more and more compelling, and it certainly is this year. And yeah, here we are on the doorstep of getting things kicked off on Thursday. So yeah, needless to say, I've been pretty pumped up, not only this week, but probably for about the last month or so.
Absolutely. And, it's something that you always know that's going to kind of bail you out when you're like a college basketball guy like me. Like, here we go. We're going right to the Masters. A lot of fun. How about you, Patrick? How are you feeling?
Yeah, can't wait. I mean, it's been an exciting 2024 PGA Tour season, a ton of first-time winners. It's been exciting. And then, I mean, the amount of storylines you have going into every Masters always get you excited, especially kind of the big names this week.
Yeah, absolutely. It's huge this week. And hey, there's a lot of changes that's happened over the past few years. And before we get into the Masters itself, I feel like, I asked Patrick this earlier. I feel like finding stats are a little bit more convoluted now with the 2 tours. Patrick told me one way he gets around it, but Brady, is there any way that you get around looking at both results and histories from the PGA and the Live Tour? Is there any good place that our listeners can go to try to handicap these events?
Patrick may know more about this than I do. I have just kind of gone to 3 different sites where I think you can find a little bit of information. I utilize fantasynational.com. It's a good model builder where you can research the stats and stuff like that. And they have the live players implemented in there, and how much data they have built into their system I'm not aware of, but it looks to be pretty accurate when you churn out, these models and what the stats are telling you. They don't look all that skewed. And then you just go to, livegolf.com. I believe that's what it is. And they're getting better. Their site is halfway decent, but they're getting better about stats. They've got some basic stuff like driving accuracy and putting and stuff like that, that you can dive into a little bit. Obviously the results, you can see what players have done, this year and past years and that type of thing. And then Data Golf is another one that's a really good site. These guys have a tremendous amount of data in their site that leads to predictability, and they've got their own rankings. So they do a lot of work for you there, and not only the PGA Tour guys, but especially the Live guys, where you don't have or seemingly harder to find information. They do a pretty good job in ranking these guys and spelling out how they're doing currently and in the past.
Yeah, Data Golf I tried too, and that's got a lot of the good information combined. It doesn't have as much strokes gained from the Live Tour, unless I'm missing something. But I didn't notice that. Patrick, what are your thoughts on where to go to handicap both of these massive leagues?
Yeah, just echoing what Brady said, Fantasy National is what I use pretty much every week, Data Golf as well. And then in terms of the strokes gained for the Live too, I mean, we saw in the first 2 years that they started, their stats were bare bones. They really had nothing in terms of everything, which made handicapping near impossible for those events. The even odds weren't available kind of in the first few years of the Live. Now they've started to kind of get better at that. Strokes gained, I believe they've started to incorporate now, or it's on the way, they had mentioned as well. So Liv's a little behind in that in terms of the overall product for the statistical modeling terms of things, but they are getting better at that. And yeah, I mean, it's not a bad product. We saw some pretty exciting finishes this year, especially last week.
Yeah, absolutely. There was been some crazy comebacks and some big names kind of showing up last week as well. Sergio being one of them. So I found that really interesting. Well, obviously massive event coming up, but Brady, before we get into that event, I'd love you to just tell us or remind us how your love for golf started, and how does it correlate with your love for betting? Where did it all start?
Yeah, I started playing golf at the age of 13. My grandpa gave me like an old set of clubs of his, and I started really getting into it and playing with my buddies, and just kind of really took a liking for the game itself. And growing up in Northern California, obviously at that time, Las Vegas or Nevada was the only legal betting state. So betting really wasn't on my radar at all. But at the same time, golf is kind of a sport where you might have a wager or two going with your friends, within the game, skins or a Nassau or something like that. So that was maybe a little bit of an introduction there. And then as far as the Masters, I remember, I think I was coming home after a soccer game or a baseball game, probably this time of year, it was a baseball game, to watch Jack and his son caddying for him on the bag in 1986 when he won his 6th green jacket. And I was watching there with my dad. I remember my dad kind of welled up, got a little teary-eyed seeing Jack's son caddy for him, and then seeing, everybody's hero from the 70s and 80s get it done again in the mid 80s. And it was remarkable. And that's how I kind of fell in love with the tournament and have really been diving in ever since. And then almost 30 years ago now, when I made my way from Northern California to Las Vegas, is really when I got introduced into wagering, the wagering side of things front and center. My first job was with a radio network where we did a show out of the MGM Grand Race and Sportsbook. So I was kind of immersed in it in that regard, and started getting into like fantasy golf leagues. And then I might put a couple bucks on a guy to win a major. And, here we are doing a podcast with you, one of, 8 or 9 today that I'll do previewing the Masters. So I've gone from, picking up a junior set of clubs as a 13-year-old to doing multiple Masters previews from a gambling angle.
Oh, that's wonderful. Great story. And yeah, I remember that when Nicholson, his son was his caddy, Jack Nicholson's, right? That was amazing. He's got the most Masters wins, I believe. It's 6, if I'm not mistaken. Yep. So what a great story. And what about you, Patrick? Tell me about your love juxtaposed with your love for betting.
Yeah, no, kind of a similar story. Obviously, started growing up playing golf, played through high school and everything. And kind of from there to my family does a yearly Masters pool, which I guess I kind of got in a little bit early, which kind of started my love for golf betting. That eventually kind of rolled into my cousins introducing me to kind of the DFS angle, the outright betting market. And then kind of during COVID, again, just started my own page and decided to kind of pursue a golf betting angle with that as well. So it's only grown from there. And yeah, I couldn't be happier. It's one of the greatest sports in terms of betting, that you can kind of get the odds every week in terms of those long shots. And it's only 4 days. You got to sweat it out.
You do. Absolutely. It's 4 days. But now let's get into it then. Let's talk about Augusta. Patrick, you have a wonderful article that you put out at the Odds Breakers breaking down basically everything. Could you just talk a little bit about some of the course information for this wonderful event?
Yeah, I mean, Augusta National, in terms of comparable courses, you can kind of look around and there's a few, but there's truly no course like Augusta National when you really break it down in the terms of overall things. You have your standard par 72 layout. Recent renovations have been there in 2022. They lengthened out 11 and 15. Then last year, 13 was changed as well, kind of increasing that yardage about 35 yards as well. Augusta is one of the longest courses on tour as well, and one of the toughest. Over the past 3 editions, the scoring average has all been above par. And then again, the fairways are on the wider side of things too when you look at it, but they're wide, but they're not at the same time, if that makes sense at all, in terms of those second shot angles where players are going to have to really get creative with those approach shots in terms of kind of how they like to shape their ball flight into those greens as well. And then one interesting thing I found as well is Augusta used to be Bermuda grass greens, and then they kind of switched over during the 1981 Masters as well to the bent grass surface that we have now. It's truly a fascinating course between the dramatic undulations and elevation changes in both the fairways and around the green complexes. But it's one of those courses where the best players always seem to rise to the top there. It challenges those elite ball strikers to kind of perform in every single aspect of their game. So it's a great course, and obviously one of my favorite events of the year.
Absolutely. And Brady, isn't it an advantage for golfers to have played this course or played this event before in order to predict their future success?
Yeah, I think it is a pretty strong angle that you have to incorporate in your handicap. And I'm sure Patrick knows this. It has the strongest course history of any tournament we see throughout the entire calendar year. Guys that play well at Augusta typically do so year in and year out. And, you know, it kind of goes hand in hand with course experience. We haven't seen a first timer or a Masters rookie, a debutant win here since 1979. It used to be the trend was that you had to play the Masters 6 times before you were likely to get a win. Now that's changed a little bit in the last 10 years. It's more like 3 or 4 times around this track, not 3 or 4 times playing around, but 3 or 4 tournaments before you're likely to get a win. So, you know, odds are still against a first timer here, and you do need to learn about this track. Patrick talked about, you know, all the nuances and, you know, uneven lies and elevation change and the speed of the greens and the undulation on the greens. And then you couple that with, you know, the Masters pressure. There's so much to digest here that you can understand just from a layman's perspective. It's very difficult to have a lot of success here when you're visiting Augusta National for your first time. And then those guys that have played here 5, 6, 7, 8, 10, 12 times, that experience translates into success. And that's what we see in terms of course history, that, you know, again, guys that play well here typically do so year after year. You just look at, you know, what we've seen recently. Tiger Woods, you know, had 4 green jackets to his name. And then in 2019, when everybody was basically writing him off, he goes and wins again. And so much of that victory, and I'm sure Tiger would tell you, is because of course knowledge and course experience and course history. And then just last year, out of nowhere, we see 3-time Masters winner Phil Mickelson finish second at 53 years old. And we see Fred Couples at 63 years old, you know, shoot a 1 under par round 71 on Thursday and make the cut. So, you know, against all odds, some of these guys are able to do the impossible because they know the course so well. They've been around it so many times, and they know some of the subtleties that the first timers here are not yet aware of.
Wow, I haven't heard some of those names in a while, so that is amazing stuff. Wow. Well, that's the great points. You know, playing the course and the term debutantes. You know, that's just been the buzzword that I've been hearing all week, and it sounds like insulting in a way. You know, or something that comes from a sci-fi movie. You're a debutante. You know, get out of here. You know, something like that. Well, I think that's how they're being treated basically in this handicapping. So, lots of great points, Brady. What about the weather here, man? Now I know I heard for rain on Thursday. Has that been still the same in the recent forecast? How's that looking?
You know, I haven't had a minute to look at it today, but I did look at it late yesterday, and it's probably changed slightly since I last looked, but they are expecting thunder showers beginning about midnight Eastern time tonight. And then all the way really through the afternoon to about 1 o'clock in the afternoon local time. And the tee times at the Masters only run through about 2 p.m. Eastern, I believe. So it appears that, you know, according to the forecast, most of the field is going to be affected by this. Now, Augusta National is one of the few properties in the entire world that not only has sub-air systems under their greens, but also in their fairways. So they are able to suck a lot of that moisture out of this golf course. And you probably, even though you're going to have some expected showers overnight and into the day on Thursday, I don't think it's going to make this property a whole lot softer, because they'll be able to kind of manipulate Mother Nature there, if you will. But it also, at the same time, might lead to some delays and some play stoppages. Earlier in the forecast, it was calling for showers. That has since turned into thunder showers, so some possible electricity in the air, which will certainly stop play. So, and then you've got some wind in the forecast as well, and that's supposed to bleed into Friday. Friday appears to be the harshest day as far as wind, up to 25 miles an hour or so. And I've even seen somebody, or some people, some reports call for, 40 something miles an hour. I don't know if that's truly the case, but I think we can all pretty much bank on Friday being pretty windy, and beginning overnight tonight and into tomorrow, there being some precipitation. Let's just hope that everything runs smoothly as far as, a very minimal stoppage of play here and there, and no real advantage to the draw. And it looks like there won't be a huge advantage to the draw, because, like I say, what the forecast is calling for currently is rain kind of throughout the day on Thursday, almost throughout the entire run of starting times on Thursday. So again, I just hate to see an advantage because of weather, and you also hate to see stoppages of play and stuff like that, because I think it interrupts a lot of the flow for not only the players, but us as fans and viewers and bettors.
No, great point. Yeah, and this rain looks like it can push the whole start back, being that there's thunder showers, right? So that means it's not like someone will start, like a group will start and possibly get through most of it, and then somebody has to start it late or the next day. It almost looks like it's going to push everything forward, I would think. Now, wind is interesting. Obviously, something that you guys are very used to capping. Patrick, do you cap windy courses or windier situations when you're looking at players? Are there players that are just better with the wind than are not?
Yeah, going back to Fantasy National too, they have that option on their site to select windier conditions when it comes to kind of players, to determine whether they're better ball strikers in that wind as well. But wind obviously plays a factor at Augusta. We've seen it play a factor even during the Texas swing. Those Texas winds can be brutal at sometimes as well. So you're always kind of looking at the weather conditions when you're factoring those into your model.
All right, good stuff. What about the key statistics that you look at for handicapping this course? Is there a certain stat that you like to look at that is better at predicting future success or failure when it comes to the Augusta and the Masters?
Augusta is one of those courses where you have to have everything clicking. It really is. So you're looking at your strokes gained tee to green there off the start. Each of the past three winners there have ranked second or better in strokes gained tee to green amongst the field, which also combines their strokes gained off the tee, strokes gained approach, and around the green. Going again with strokes gained approach here, each of the past three winners have ranked ninth or better in the field during their victories. And then strokes gained around the green here is also crucial too. Players are going to undoubtedly miss the greens this week, and they need to be able to scramble to kind of save par on some of these tougher par fours that they're going to face. Well, it's not a putting contest, or as John Rahm referred to the Amex a few years ago, a POS putting contest. It does matter. These greens are lightning fast. They're the fastest players we'll see all season long here. The stimps around 13 to 14. So while you're not necessarily looking at strokes gained putting in this, you're looking at 3 putt avoidances. Players are going to need to limit those kind of bogeys, double bogeys, while even if they hit the green in two, these greens are extremely difficult. So they'll need to kind of limit any of those bad numbers on their card. Driving distance is another statistic here that has played a role in the past here. You've seen John Rahm, Scotty Scheffler, Dustin Johnson, Patrick Reed, and even Sergio all rank in the top 20 in terms of driving distance for the week as well. Brooks last year was in the mix, and he's one of the longer hitters as well. Rory finishing second in 2022, which I guess you could say is a little bit of an asterisk mark after a 64 on Sunday. When going into Sunday, he was completely out of it. And then outside of that, your scoring conditions, most of the par fours here rank between the 450 and 500 yard range here. There was only one hole that played under par outside of the par fives last year, which was the par 316. So these par fours are extremely crucial to just get a par and get out. If you have an opportunity for a birdie, that's an opportunity that you really can't pass up here. The majority of the par fives range from the 550 to 600 yard range here. And these are the scoring opportunities for the players this week. These are where they're going to need to get those birdies to kind of better themselves amongst the field here as well. So that's kind of what I'm looking at as well. Proximity gain 200 yard plus as well. And then event history always matters at Augusta. So those are kind of my key statistics for the week.
All right. No, that's well broken down. Brady, do you have agreement there? And also, let's get into some of the favorites in this course.
Yeah, I pretty much echo everything Patrick had to say there. Strokes gained tee to green, I absolutely looked at. Strokes gained approach, proximity from 200 yards or better, where the majority of the approach play is going to come from. 3-putt avoidance, absolutely. Scrambling, that ability to find that creativity and that magic touch around these greens and get up and down to save par. And then probably the statistics that I put more emphasis on were driving distance, like Patrick noted, strokes gained around the green, which is very similar to scrambling. The par fours, strokes gained on the par fours of 450 to 500 yards. That's really crucial around here. And then par five scoring, like Patrick said. So pretty much a ditto of what he laid out there. And when you kind of look at that, strokes gained tee to green, driving distance, strokes gained approach around the green, par fours, par fives, proximity, 3-putt avoidance, scrambling, like Patrick opened with, you got to do everything well. It's Augusta National after all. But, it is kind of different than some of the other majors that we see. Obviously, it's the only major that we play the same course every year. But, I think the U.S. Open is more about fairways and greens, driving it really accurately and being able to punch out of that ankle-deep rough. The PGA Championship has become really a bombers major and ball striking. And then the British, it's a little bit of everything, creativity and magic. It's probably more like the Masters than the others. You have to deal with the elements a lot of the times for the British Open as well. But Augusta, you're dealing with uneven lies where balls are above your feet or balls are below your feet, or you're trying to hit a cut shot into a dog leg that goes from right to left. And there's so many different things about this particular test versus the other majors or any really other course that they see for the most part throughout the entire PGA Tour season. So, every major is going to require you to do everything well. And I think Augusta, when you just kind of try and simplify it, it's be long enough off the tee, be able to hit your irons in both directions, and be a magician around the greens.
No, it makes total sense. What about, or who are some of your favorites and why are they favorites in this course? And why don't you give me a few sleepers as well, Brady?
Sure. Well, the shortest shot that I played this week is Xander Schauffele, and I got a pretty decent number on him at 18-1. That was last weekend, I believe. And then like Masters week, Monday rolled around and bang, he just plummeted. I saw him as low as 12. I think the consensus number is probably about 14. I'm still okay with 14. That's not too shabby. If you could obviously get better than that, more power to you. But Xander's been a machine this year and in years past. He's already got 6 top 10 finishes this season, and he's got a runner-up at Augusta, including multiple top 10 finishes there. He went into the lead on Sunday at the Players' Championship and was caught by a miraculous charge by Scottie Scheffler. And Patrick alluded to this a little bit at the beginning of the podcast here, that, you've got some other courses that are similar to Augusta National. Nothing like Augusta National, but there are certainly some corollaries or some pointers. And a couple of those are Kapalua, where they begin the year in January at the Plantation Course in Maui, and then also where they play the Genesis Invitational, Riviera Country Club. And Xander Schauffele just finished 4th at Riviera earlier this year and has won at Kapalua before. A couple of other courses that I used that are similar in what it takes as far as, driving accuracy, all the different skill sets. Narashino Country Club in Japan, where Xander Schauffele won a gold medal at the Olympics, and then also the Renaissance Club, where they played a Scottish Open, which is another tournament that Schauffele won. So he just checks a bevy of boxes here. I think you could argue, and actually we were talking about data golf earlier, they rank him, Xander Schauffele, as the second best player in the world right now, and I think that's a case that you can make for sure in strongly. So, the knock against him is that he can't close the door and he can't win. Well, he has closed the door, certainly. And people remember what they saw last, the Players' Championship. But, a lot of the times that he has gone into a Sunday with the lead, he has been able to close the door. And I think if he's in that position again, if you put yourself in that position enough, and maybe that loss at the Players' Championship just builds that scar tissue, builds that experience even more so, and maybe he figures out how to get it done this time. So Schauffele was the shortest shot I landed on. And then the longest shot I landed on was the Irishman, Shane Lowry, at 70-1. I've seen him down closer to 55, 50-1. Maybe you can find a 60 out there. I would say, 55 or better is still a pretty good bet on Shane Lowry, who's been playing brilliant golf. And this guy's really a big game hunter. He plays difficult golf courses very, very well. He's had a number of great finishes at TPC Sawgrass, including most recently a 19th place finish there. PGA National, where they play the Cognizant Classic, formerly the Honda Classic. He's had a number of great finishes there, including a 4th just last month. And then he went on to Bay Hill to finish 3rd. So, the guy has been red hot on the Florida swing. He's got 4 straight top 25 finishes here at Augusta. His iron play is exquisite. His work around the greens is tremendous. And he's got driving distance as well. And maybe the one weakness in his game is sometimes he gets a little errant off the tee. But Patrick noted, these are very wide fairways, so it mitigates some of that driving inaccuracy. And as proven, Lowry's been able to figure this place out with 4 straight top 25 finishes and a top 10 recently. I think it was a 3rd place finish a few years ago when Scotty Scheffler won as well. So Lowry, I thought, in the neighborhood 55, 60, 70-1 was a pretty big number on a field, first of all, that only has 89 players. And you can throw out a lot of those players who are, either first timers or former champions in their 60s or amateurs. So, a lot of people will tell you, Kiev, that this golf tournament really can probably only be won by, 30 or 40 guys. And if I've got one of those guys at 60, 70-1, that feels like a pretty good price to me.
That's a great number, Brady. And I'm glad he said that because I took Lowry as well. I saw he had some pretty good approach to green and shots gained numbers when I looked at it a little bit. So that's one of them I took. And, of course, from reading Patrick's article a little bit, too. Patrick, what about you, man? Do you have any favorites that you like and any long shots that you like?
Yeah, I echo Brady's points. I'm on Xander and Lowry as well. But, this week it all boils down whether it's basically to Scotty or to not Scotty this week. He enters this tournament winning 2 of his last 3. He won the API, he won the Players, finished runner-up in his most recent event here. In his previous 4 trips to Augusta, he's finished inside the top 20, including a win here. And Superman himself basically had his kryptonite in his putting, which we could always rely on of, hey, maybe he's not going to putt well this week, but he has taken that kryptonite away from us with this transition to his mallet putter here, gaining strokes in each of his last 3 events here. He is an absolute world beater right now. It's just insane. And even last year, too, when he finished T10, he ranked 50th in the field in strokes gained putting. And with him improving in that as well, you have to kind of figure that that's going to be almost his floor this week. So I fully expect Scotty to be in contention this week, but just an absolute incredible player. There is one interesting kind of piece of information that came out about Scotty earlier this week. So he is roommates with Sam Burns this week. Both their wives are pregnant, and Scotty has vowed to withdraw from this event if his wife does go into labor along with Sam Burns. Obviously, his wife isn't due until the end of the month, but it is a little bit of an interesting situation here that you didn't really expect with the odds-on favorite at this event here. So just something to note there. Rory also is another interesting piece this week, looking to complete his career Grand Slam. And I was listening to another show this week from Andy Lack, who is just an incredible golf resource there. He's on the grounds of Augusta National this week. And he had mentioned, too, that in the past, Rory had played his practice rounds with fellow big dogs, Tiger, Freddie Couples, kind of being more the mentoree than the mentor. However, this year he played with Aberg, who is another kind of up-and-comer on the PGA Tour. He's already won at the RBC, or the RSM Classic, and it was a Ryder Cup teammate as well of Rory. But Rory kind of took more of a mentor role this week at Augusta that he'd said, and just looked phenomenal, coming off his best finish at T3 at the Valero as well. So another guy that I didn't play, but he's certainly, I wouldn't expect him to be in contention come Sunday. So those are kind of the two favorites that I didn't play, but both have pretty interesting storylines heading into this week as well.
Okay, so Rory 10-1. And Scheffler 4-1. I mean that looks terrible for golf odds at DraftKings. I was thinking hopefully maybe it's like Rahm last year where Scheffler double bogeys the first hole and then all of a sudden he drops down a few points. Maybe you can get him at double digits to 1. I mean that would be an interesting live situation. So you can be live betting this, and I think maybe my strategies kind of have been, and I obviously don't do it as much as you guys, but I like to, maybe on Saturday morning pop a few favorites that have kind of dropped down a little bit that I think they have a gumption to win some of these big majors. So that's one strategy I was thinking about employing. But maybe you get some of these favorites better, and Scheffler's just been amazing in the number one ranked golfer so far this year. How about a sleeper, Patrick? You have a besides Lowry? Come on.
Yeah, I mean, so sleeper is a hard term to use at Augusta National because dating back to 2010, the largest pre-tournament winner was Danny Willett, going off at 66-1 here. Over the past 5 seasons, the pre-tournament average for winners has been 19-1. So like Brady mentioned before here, there's only a select number of guys that can win at Augusta, and it's usually the top of the board here. This isn't really kind of one where you're looking at your 110 to 100-1 shot like other tournaments as well. In addition to Lowry, I like Corey Connors. I have him as a top 20 play this week. He's made the cut in each of his 9 events this season. In his recent 3 outings, he finished T18 at the API, T13 at the Players, and T25 at the Valero Texas Open. Again, that Genesis kind of correlation as well. Hideki won the Genesis earlier this year, which we'll get to later, who's also another one of my plays this week. And yeah, I mean, Corey Connors is one of the premier ball strikers on tour. His approach numbers have been insane this season. While he's not one of the longest guys off the tour, he has gained distance in a few events this week. His pretty much kryptonite has been his play around the green and his putting, but he did gain strokes at Augusta back in 2002. So he's proven that he can putt here. So I don't mind Corey Connors this week as kind of a longer odds play.
All right. Well, good stuff. Yeah. You can also go 10-1, 5 to, or top 5, top 10, top 20. You can go in those situations too. And if you're not, you're worried about a player probably that's not quite good enough to win in this course, but can make a run, that's not a bad way to look at it. What about some possible fades, or at least guys you're not betting on, Brady? Do you have some people you want to stay away that might be a little bit trendy or popular, or something you disagree with, or maybe you're fading them in a matchup?
Right. Yeah, absolutely, Kiev. There was 3 guys going into this week that I was trying to find a matchup where I was going to be betting against them, and that was Ricky Fowler, Sungjae Im, and Justin Rose. Ricky Fowler obviously has had great success here in the past at the Masters. I believe he's got a runner-up finish. I know he's finished top 5 here before. And he had a great year last year. He won a PGA Tour event last year, but he's fallen off quite a bit. He didn't perform well at the Ryder Cup and just has really been a shell of himself this year on the PGA Tour. So he was a guy that I was looking to go against, but really didn't find the matchup where his opponent was someone I necessarily wanted to back. And the same thing with Sungjae Im, who's had tremendous finishes here at Augusta. And that kind of gave me a little bit of pause because we've talked about course history. I mean, who knows? Maybe Sungjae Im will be this year's Phil Mickelson and he shows up and finishes second or something like that. but his form so far this season has been the worst of his career. But I couldn't, again, find a matchup where his opponent was somebody I liked. And the same thing for Justin Rose, who won on tour last year, won at Pebble Beach. And again, he was not paired in a head-to-head with someone that I necessarily wanted to back. So, there's so many different markets or offerings for head-to-head matchups. So you have to try and find where you can find the right one, and don't necessarily just blindly go against these guys. You have to find that right head-to-head matchup that the odds maker has posted. But I did end up fading a few guys in matchups that I did play. I took Jordan Spieth at minus 125 over Brooks Koepka. And I've seen the price on Spieth get a little more expensive, into the neighborhood of minus 135 or so. And that's probably about as far as I'd go, maybe minus 130 if you can find it there. But Koepka, I would be surprised if he's not in the conversation and didn't have a top 20 finish or something like that. But Spieth is a player I really like this week. I've got him for an outright and a top 20. And I feel like maybe Koepka is getting a lot of the support from the masses and the casual fans who saw what he did last year. Saw him finish second and really dominate this golf tournament for about 2.5 days. And they're going back to the well with Koepka because he's also a major championship machine. He won after coming up short at the Masters last year, he turned right around and won the PGA Championship. So maybe that was his kind of avenging the loss, if you will. I don't know if that's going to translate all the way to, 12 months later, where people are expecting him to bounce back once again. So I think maybe the love for Koepka this year is kind of what we see in the NFL, where people are betting on what they saw last. And what they saw last was Koepka, nearly winning the Masters last year. If you look at what he's done on the LIV circuit, the last 3 or 4 events, he hasn't been that great. Started off the campaign pretty well, did well out here in Las Vegas during Super Bowl week. He had a good finish, but the last 3 or so have been pretty disappointing. So I don't know if he comes in with great form. A lot of people will argue that doesn't matter and all Koepka cares about is majors, and I'm not going to argue against that, but it's also hard to argue with what how he's been playing as of late. So that was one guy I went against. Another guy I went against was Wyndham Clark. And Wyndham Clark is one of the quote-unquote debutantes there for you, Kiev, defending U.S. Open champion and absolutely a world-class player, currently ranked 4th in the world. And I think he'll make his way around here okay. But as we've talked about, it's very difficult. I don't care who you are. It's tough your first time. Tiger missed the cut in 1996 before he went on to win it the next year. So maybe Wyndham Clark's a guy to bet on for next year. But having never been around this track before, I think you're at a disadvantage. And I took him or I went against him in a matchup against Joaquin Niemann, the LIV player who's been around here 4 times already and has been progressively better in his finishes. I took Niemann at minus 120 over Clark. I think I've seen that up to about minus 130 recently. And then finally, I took Tony Finau at minus 125, I believe it was, over Cameron Young. And Young's had success here in the past, and he's an extremely talented player and has a lot of the tools that you need around this course, specifically driving distance and iron play. But the putter has really gone south for Cameron Young. I also think he's kind of a fiery player who can get very upset at himself and kind of lose his composure. You don't necessarily see it on the golf course, come out in a big way, but you can kind of see him getting frustrated sometimes. And that could be the case for him this week because his putting has been so poor this season, and we've seen average putters win at Augusta before, but if you're really struggling with your putting, it's not a place to necessarily get right. So Tony Finau is a guy who I really like this week. I've played him for an outright and a top 20. He's had great success here in the past. He's playing tremendous golf right now. His putting has been poor as well. But if he can putt just decent, I think the rest of his game will carry him. Whereas Cameron Young, he's relatively new to this tournament. And if his putting is going to make it tough on him this week, I think he's a guy that we can go against. So Finau over Young, Niemann over Clark, and Spieth over Koepka.
All right, Patrick, any agreement, disagreement, and anybody you are fading in these matchups?
Yeah, I agree with the Brooks fade this week too. Last year when we saw him finish runner-up at this event, he had won the Live Orlando event the week prior. However, this year he comes in off a T28 at Live Hong Kong and a T45 at Live Miami. So he is not in the same form at all. He's also switching putters, which is also another issue that you don't like to see for a guy heading into a major championship here. On Monday, he had used a blade, and then I believe on Tuesday he had switched back to the mallet or vice versa. But you never like to see a guy who's kind of in between clubs per se, especially with a putter, and its importance at Augusta National. Another guy I'm looking to fade this week is Victor Hovland. Hovland does have some great course history here, but ever since he won the Tour Championship last year, he has not been the same golfer whatsoever. And even in his press conference this week, too, it was interesting to hear him talk about how he's still changing his swing and still looking to kind of tweak different things. Heading into Augusta, you shouldn't be tweaking your swing at all. It should be settled down, and you should have a game plan going into here. And even the comments from his practice round, too, it looked like he was out there just practicing rather than trying to kind of win a tournament and kind of see what these tour pros do of kind of roll several putts out. And last year, Hovland kind of came full arc where his play around the green, which had burdened him in the past, was much better. However, that issue has reared its head again this season. He's coming off his worst performance, T62, since the 2002 Genesis Scottish Open. So he's not in good form. His swing's kind of a mess right now. So I'm looking to fade Hovland this week, and that's one of my matchups that I had played as well. So I have Neiman over Hovland this week as well. And then Shane Lowry over, can't see that right now.
Sam Burns.
Who it is. Sam Burns as well. Yeah, Sam Burns' form has just kind of fallen off a cliff these past three events here. And it wasn't really in one particular aspect, but just his overall game as well. So I like Lowry in that matchup a lot. And then another interesting...
Well, he's having a kid. That's the big thing, right?
Yeah, I'm fading his recent form more than his possible withdrawal of his wife going into labor, I would say. And then even another story interesting this week, too, is Minwoo Lee. So Minwoo Lee broke his finger 10 days ago, dropping a dumbbell on it. And he's still playing in this week, I guess. And he's not been in good form. He finished T44 at the API, T54 at the Players, and then missed the cut at the Valspar in his most recent event. He does have a good history at the Masters, but yeah, Minwoo Lee is going to be another guy that I'm looking to kind of possibly fade this week as well.
All right, well, great. So here's what I did. I saw Tiger Woods in some matchups, and I'm like, I'm not sure if he can make it. I think he's going to play because he can. He's the Masters. He's one of the legends in golf, literally around my age. You know, he was kind of the guy I watched when I was young and everything and cheered for. And, you know, and he really, I mean, nobody's changed the game like Tiger has. But at the same time, this man's had so many surgeries. He has so many ankle issues. I mean, I took Phil over him, and I got in the minus 120s. And I believe I took Bubba even over him because Bubba's got the lefty, and I think the lefty plays a little bit. I think it plays good to this course from what I've heard in the past. So, and I'm just kind of, I guess, betting against the fact that, and I don't want to say I'm hoping for anything because Tiger's, I don't want to see him lose ever, but I'm just betting against the fact that he can make it into the cut, even nonetheless get through the cut. And I'm wondering what your thoughts are on fading Tiger. Brady, you can go first.
Yeah, you know, I stayed away from getting involved with Tiger, but I pretty much agree with everything you're selling there, Kiev. I think Tiger would never admit this, but I think it would be a big win for him to make it to the weekend this week, just to make the cut. And I hope he does. You know, I'm with you. We're not only golf bettors, but we're golf fans. And I'd like to see Tiger make it into the weekend. That doesn't mean that Phil Mickelson can't still win that bet for you. But, you know, in Tiger's last 6 events, he's had to withdraw from 3 of them. And it's sad to see a guy, kind of fade out at the end of his career like that because of injuries and surgeries and not being able to just walk 72 holes. And, on top of that, this is a very difficult golf course to walk. It's got a ton of elevation change and it's hilly. And, it's tough for anybody to walk 72 holes, let alone, Tiger Woods at his age and with all that ails his body. So, there's plenty of reasons to go against Tiger. I've seen his price to make the cut get as high as like plus 130. And I don't think that's such a bad bet. You've got the top 50 players and ties are going to make it into the weekend here. So you could argue that that's going to end up, being about a 60 player field out of 89 that we're starting with. And we talked about the amateurs and the debutantes and the past champions, who were up there in age. Tiger's probably got a decent shot to make the cut if he's healthy. But no, I don't mind betting against him in a matchup, even against Bubba, what have you, because I think the odds are a little bit in your favor there. At the same time, I kind of like plus 130 for him to stick around for the weekend.
All right, that's a possible way to hedge and maybe win both.
Yeah, there you go.
Situation.
Good point.
So
kind of middle it, right?
Yeah, try to middle that sucker. Just got to hope for Phil to really show up on that one. Another one I'm fading, and this last one I'll cover. I don't like DeChambeau that much, and I know his off the tee is amazing. And maybe you can answer if he's extremely accurate. He's the farthest hitter in the tour, definitely in the Live Tour. But I just think the greens are just too hard for him. He's never been that great in the greens, and he hasn't done that great in this event. I'm taking a shot with Cam Smith, and I'm getting plus 125 with Cam Smith over Bryson DeChambeau. I'm kind of hoping he kind of has a little bit of a, he's a little overly emotional at times. And I'm not sure if this is the kind of course you can be overly emotional on. So I'm doing that. And Patrick, what do you think about that? Is there an angle there, or are you kind of just staying away?
Yeah, I mean, Cam Smith's an interesting one, right? So he's had a few decent finishes this year, T2 at Live Hong Kong, but last week in Miami, he withdrew due to food poisoning. So he only played really one round there. DeChambeau's another interesting character too, as well. He's had a great season on Live, hasn't kind of crossed the winner's circle yet, but he's finished inside the top 10, I think, in each of his last 4 appearances on the Live Tour. So he's had a great year. And yeah, I mean, I don't know. Personally, I'm probably going to stay away from that matchup. But, yeah, I don't hate it. It should be an interesting one as well.
And I had a plus sign next to it,
Yeah.
So it's just one of those with a plus sign. And you have a guy that's also played well before at the Masters. And it could just be a course thing. Yeah, DeChambeau's doing great in the Live Tour, but he goes to this course that, can completely crumble. I'm not hearing a lot of people and a lot of buzz on Rahm, the champion from last year. It's just that champions just do not repeat in these situations. I mean, it's kind of interesting to hear nothing about Rahm, yet his number kind of staying around 11-1, 10-1, 12-1. Brady, how come I haven't heard anything on Rahm?
Well, I heard on John Rahm from a guy that is widely respected in the golf betting space, and a guy that I kind of check out what he's doing every week. And that's a gentleman by the name of Ben Coley over in the United Kingdom. Just a tremendous golf tipster, and his breakdowns are great. You can check him out on Twitter. But he likes John Rahm this week and thinks he will defend his title. And I think there's something to that from a value perspective. With Scotty Scheffler being so short, I think it's kind of inflated the number a little bit on John Rahm. I've seen him as high as 13-1, and maybe his true odds are more like 9 or 10. So I think there is, a good bargain on John Rahm. But, you talked about it, Kiev. It is very difficult to defend your title here. It's only happened 3 times. And the guys that have done it, Jack Nicklaus, Nick Faldo, and Tiger Woods. It doesn't get a whole lot better than that. And John Rahm, it's not outlandish to say he's not in that territory. He's that good for sure. Just because he went to the Live Tour doesn't mean he's not one of the top 3 players in the world anymore. The Champions Dinner, all the media commitments. It is tough to have the same focus, I believe, when you come back here. And Rahm even talked about it when he won his first major, the U.S. Open at Torrey Pines, that was obviously an incredible accomplishment. But he said when he won the Masters, it felt even bigger. So that kind of tells me that when you get here and you get on that first tee on Thursday and you're so full of that emotion, that's part of what makes it difficult too, after you just won your first Masters. So, Ben Coley, a guy I have tremendous respect for. I'm not going to argue. And obviously you can make a great case why one of the best players in the world is going to get it done again. But I didn't go down that road. It wouldn't surprise me. But I'm leaning towards more on the no.
All right. No, that makes sense. Was just curious about that because just such a large name in the golf industry really right now. Just, he's highly respected, won it last year. I watched it last year and was just amazed by some of his putts and his finish at the end. And it's funny watching Phil actually push that a little bit too, but how he passed Koepka last year and just kind of kept going was very inspiring in a way, and how happy he was afterwards with his wife and kid and everything. I thought that was wonderful too. So interesting story, but we only have a couple minutes left. Patrick, how are you constructing your ticket here this weekend for the Masters?
Yeah, so my outrights this week, I have Xander at 18-1, Hideki at 25-1, Niemann at 30-1, Finau at 40-1, and Lowry rounding out the card at 60-1. Those are my outrights. Obviously, I love Xander this week, but Xander is such a question mark in terms of his ability to get across the finish line, which I guess we've seen this season here, kind of coming up short on Sunday at the Players' Championship. And even going back to his victory at the Travelers too, which was interesting. He went into Sunday with a lead there. He was down heading into 18 with Thagala on the tee box ahead of him. Thagala shanks one to the right bunker, tries to get out, it's embedded, eventually doubles it, and Xander goes on to win that event. But then the week after at the Genesis, Xander went out and just dominated. So I think he's in terrific form right now. He's shown he's a major player. He's finished inside the top 20 in each of his last 7 majors. So I really like Xander this week as well, kind of as my main outright outside the other 5. And then in terms of top 20s, I have Fitzpatrick at plus 115, Corey Connors plus 170, Patrick Reed at plus 175. Not much information out there about kind of those live players, like we said, but Reed is a magician around these greens. We've seen his history at Augusta, so I really like that price at plus 175. And then rounding out the top 20s, I have Siwoo Kim at plus 175. So that's my card this week. Yeah, I like it as well. So should be a great week.
All right. And make sure you check out Patrick's stuff at the Oddsbreakers. If you haven't read his article in the Masters yet, you better check that out because that has pretty much everything about the course, graphs, everything you need to know. Just a wonderful job, Patrick. And Brady, why don't you tell our listeners how you're constructing your card and where they can get your great information and articles?
Well, I read Patrick's article and decided to land on about 5 of the same guys. So no, I'm just kidding. But we did land on I believe 5 of the same guys. I'm also on Schauffele. I'm also on Hideki Matsuyama. I'm also on Shane Lowry, and I'm also on Tony Finau. I don't know if you said you're on Joaquin Niemann, but I am on Joaquin. Okay, so you're on Niemann.
6 for 6.
There's the 5, I guess.
Yeah.
So Schauffele, Hideki, Niemann, Lowry, and Finau. The other 2 that are not on Patrick's card that I went with are Jordan Spieth and Will Zalatoris. I didn't love Zalatoris as far as the number I got because it has drifted since I bet it. I bet it way back in February when he finished runner-up at Riviera to Matsuyama. And at that time, it was a very good number. I got 28 when most of the numbers that were being dealt were, 25 or lower. Now he's drifted up to about 38 because he missed the cut at the Players' Championship. But I'm not too worried about that. I still think Willie Z has everything it takes to win around here, and I think he'll show up once again. He's finished runner-up here on debut and then followed that up with a 6th place finish. And Jordan Spieth, we know, is just a Masters savant. He's been here 10 times and finished top 5 6 times, including a win. So Schauffele, Spieth, Zalatoris, Hideki, Niemann, Lowry, and Finau. I also played Schauffele for a top 10 finish. And then the rest of those guys, I played for a top 20 finish as well. And then, of course, I went over the 3 matchups that I played.
All right. Well, wonderful stuff. I'm pretty similar too, because I have Lowry and Zalatoris I took. I did take Rahm. I got him at a 14-1. So, what the hell? I figured that, because of what you said with the great point that everybody's on Scotty, maybe it did knock his odds a little bit off. So we'll see what happens there. And remember, you can obviously catch some of these guys, some of these favorites on Saturday. If they're just, 6-7 positions down from the leaderboard, you might get some pretty good odds on them. So remember to do that if you can. But Brady, wonderful talking to you again, man. Thank you so much for coming on. And Patrick, your insights are just amazing in this industry, in this sport. So thanks to both of you for coming on. And I'll be looking forward to all your next stuff coming out at the next event.
Thanks so much, Kiev. I appreciate you having me on here. And, we were on not long ago during football season, and great to be back with you as we approach the first major of the year.
All right. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Odds Breakers. We have a massive weekend, as you know, with the Masters coming on. UFC 300 and Major League Baseball isn't stopping for any moments. If you have any information or any questions that you'd love to ask us, feel free to tweet us at theoddsbreakers.com. Enjoy the big events this weekend. Enjoy all the games and go get some winners.